another week, another House of the Dragon episode to catch up on, to review, to recap. This series has been really fun and really enjoyable, guys, and so I hope you like the review. The episode I'll be reviewing is called The Princess and the Queen, and in this episode we see the opening where Rhaenyra is giving birth to a child, but Alicent wants to see the child immediately. It's kind of a power move to basically, say that she's the one in charge. So what Rhaenyra does is she actually gets dressed, obviously with the help of the nurses, and after she gives birth, and walks up the stairs so that, Alicent wouldn't have the satisfaction of holding her child or being brought her child without her being present. So we also see kind of the pettiness of Rhaenyra this episode too, but it's really cool because the episode opens with her being in a weakened state, not only as far as her physical health, like taking on just giving birth, but we see that her group and her supporters are few and far between, and that there's a growing kind of like darkness over her house or her side of the family. So we see that, with this 10-minute shot of her walking up the stairs going to Alicent, we see that beautifully shot. And then we end up going to the next scene, which is in the dragon pits, where all the teenagers are basically learning, hey, how do you teach a dragon to breathe fire on something? And the only kid who doesn't have a dragon is made fun of. So Aemon doesn't have a kid. He's the second son of Viserys, and he basically doesn't have a dragon. So the boys pull a prank on him. They bring a pig out and basically say, here's your dragon. And we'll see that does factor in later in the season. But just, it's an important thing to keep in mind that, hey, Aemon doesn't have a dragon at this point. We then see that Alicent shares with Sir Criston Cole about everything that's going on. And Criston Cole just like goes off on Rhaenyra. And Alicent's like, you can't speak that out loud, dude. That's treason. And so that doesn't lead anywhere. But it's just a fun fact, because Sir Criston Cole, and again, this is 10 years after the events of the previous episode, is still ticked off about everything that occurred. So it really shows how he's kind of petty as well. Then we see Alicent have a scene with Aegon where she sees that he's jacking off in a window, basically on the common populace, and she, he jumps down as soon as mom comes in, but she basically discusses that he needs to take his role as the firstborn son seriously, because as soon as Rhaenyra ascends to the throne, she's going to be trying to take out all the heirs like that, so that she can, wipe the chessboard and only have her children be left to be heirs. So then we have the linchpin scene of the whole entire episode, which happens in the sparring grounds. Sir Criston Cole and Sir Harwin Breakbones are training, their prospective children. Of course, Harwin can't admit openly that he's the father of the boys. But an argument breaks out after the sparring match goes on between Aemon and Jacaerys, and basically, or Aegon and Jacaerys. And basically what ends up happening is Jacaerys, or Aegon, goes way too hard and is about to pummel Jacaerys into the ground, but Sir Harwin separates them. We see that Criston Cole says this, which is pretty iconic. He says, men would rarely have so much devotion to a brother, uncle, or son. And as soon as he says son, Harwin starts beating his face in. And for every one of those pummels, it's worth 1,000 times whatever it's worth to get beat in the face, because now you've kind of proven that Sir Harwin's their father, and their father isn't Laenor. Sir Laenor has a moment where he walks in after all this has occurred in the courtyard, and he basically tells Rhaenyra that he's found a sparring partner, and that he wants to go over to battle the Triarchy in the war. And he says it's better to not sail into a storm in the first place than deal with it while there, which is a phrase that comes up later in the episode. Sir Lionel then proceeds to have a conversation behind the scenes with Harwin, which we're privy to, and basically he's confessing that he's known about it the whole entire time, and that Harwin's brought a disgrace to his house, and we actually see that they both go back to Harrenhal, but what we don't see is Larys actually kills Sir Harwin and we have a brief scene at first where Lars is creating operatives. Basically, he clamps somebody's tongue and then, cuts off their tongues so his agents can't talk, And pretty much what we see is those agents go to Harrenhal, they trail Lionel, and they trail Harwin, and they basically set their rooms on fire and murder them. So Laris, who had been told early in the episode by Alicent wishes that her father could be back and be the Hand of the King. Well, he took that literally, and so he killed his dad, who's currently the Hand of the King, and he also killed his brother. So it was a pretty dark ending, and he gives a monologue, like an evil monologue, at the end of the episode. We do see, too, that Rhaenyra has one trick up her sleeve, or one thing she wants to try before she goes. She tries to marry off Helena with Jacaerys, but whenever she puts forth the offer, it's pretty much shot down. And then the other group we follow this episode is Daemon and his wife Laena in Pentos. Daemon and Laena, the first scene they have together, they're flying their dragons together. And that night they're offered an opportunity to stay in Pentos as long as they provide protection from the Triarchy. And Daemon considers it, but Laena's opposed to it. So even claims that Daemon is not the same person she got married to. She is also pregnant, but when she gives birth, the child can't breech, so the only thing left to do would be a C-section. But there's no guarantee the child would stay alive, and so basically what she does is or Daemon says, is just don't do anything, because he'd seen his mother pass that way. We see Laena dramatically, but we see Laena run out of the keep at Pentos and be burnt by Vhagar. Vhagar actually, she tells him Dracarys, and Vhagar hates to do what he does, but he burns his own, rider alive. So that'll become a big point, and you can see kind of this episode, what are the two things that happened? Well, we're told that Aemon doesn't have a dragon, and we're told that Laena is murdered, so she no longer has Vhagar as her dragon, and, well, you put 2 and 2 together, you'll figure out what happens next episode. Overall, I think that the episode is really strong. I think Larys' speech at the end of the episode cements kind of how having kids in Westeros is a terrible idea, and it causes all the grief and pain. It doesn't actually solve any of the issues. We also see that the sparring scene was great because a lot was shown without there being much overtly said. Like we knew that Harwin was, excited when his boys were sparring and learning, and we knew that he took it personally, whenever Criston Cole was goading him. And so, even though it's not explicitly stated, it's clear to everybody around that Sir Harwin's the actual father of the child. Vhagar burning Laena was like a good gut punch, like it was really well thought out. And I really like how Rhaenyra now is at a disadvantage, whereas in the previous episodes, she was always seemed to be on top. I kind of like that Alicent's got the upper hand. I will say the time jump was extremely jarring for me, so I don't know if it was for everybody, but I watched the episode through a second time and it wasn't as bad. But you almost had to watch the episode like it's a secondary pilot, and the first, half of the season was just a prologue. But the time jump was definitely jarring, and Daemon's change of character didn't seem well explained. How he went from somebody who had so much suave and wanted to, rule Westeros to somebody who kind of just would rather chill in Pentos away from the Game of Thrones. That just seems a little bit odd. And it seems odd that he hasn't done anything for that many years, too, which is alluded to in the meeting with the small council. So, I didn't like that. But final verdict for the episode, if my dog doesn't growl, I'd give the episode a 7 out of 10, because while everything was on par with the previous episodes, I think the time jump really did work against this episode and took me out of it multiple times. So, I hope you enjoyed this review. If you have, remember to like, comment, and subscribe.